We were pretty famous back in high school. Trust us!
Had a whole future ahead of us, but now we suck.
All that potential now is flowing in the aqueducts.
Through the sands of time, many did forget.
But now our time has come to resurrect. But a podcast?
Sad I know, but can you blame us?
We are desperate to be much more than high school famous.
Hello and welcome to another thrilling episode of High School Famous, the podcast where we do whatever we want. I'm Matt.
Sean here. It's thrilling!
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
Sean, so I came today.
Prepped.
That's the whole sentence. No, I'm prepped. I came today. In my pants.
I'm not gonna go. Nothing. No
You're just
comment.
You're just not gonna.
No comment on your situation or mine.
So this is our 25th episode.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And what I'm bringing to the table today has no significance to that whatsoever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess if do you have to be 25 to rent a car?
I believe that's still the rule.
Then maybe if episodes were years, then our podcast is now old enough to rent a car.
Well, interesting that you said the word car.
Oh.
So, Sean, what is your favorite trilogy of all time?
Oh. I'm going to have to say the Back to the Future trilogy.
Correct. Sean, we're going to talk about Back to the Future trilogy.
All right.
Yeah.
What if I gave a different answer?
Then I would have said you were wrong.
Oh, okay. All right.
So basically, I had seen this post of basically a ton of problems and paradox issues with Back to the Future, and there's a ton of them. So I lost that list and searched for new lists. Found many new lists, a lot of which have a lot of the same stuff, and some of them have different things. But basically, I wanted to just have a discussion with you about all the things that are wrong or convoluted or basically just don't make sense with your favorite trilogy of all time. A lot of this you'll probably agree with. Some of it maybe will throw you for a loop. Either way, probably won't ruin the trilogy for you. I'm sure you'll still enjoy it either way.
No, so I've seen the honest trailers for those movies and the pitch meetings, so they already pointed out a lot of things. Plus, I know there's one thing from that Smodcast episode that we heard.
Yeah.
Which points out something that is a pretty big one.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't really one of the things on my list, but yeah.
But I still enjoy the movies quite a bit.
Oh yeah,
so
I think they're still definitely very fun movies, even though they're, obviously very flawed. Obviously, time travel is, there's no real right or wrong answer to it.
Yeah.
It's all just, what anybody thinks should be true or shouldn't be true. But some of these things I think are very interesting, at least. So I have quite a few things on the list. If we get to them all, cool. If we don't, that's fine, because I'm sure we'll kind of go off on some tangents here. They're not going to be in chronological order per se, but I'm going to try to do them at least by movie. So we'll kind of hit up the movies correctly in order, but and who knows, we might end up leading off a little bit into other movies, and then we might have to go back and forth a bit. But yeah, so that being said, let's just jump into this. So the first thing is, why don't Marty McFly's parents, at the end of the movie, how do they not recognize the fact that their kid looks an awful lot like this Calvin Klein guy we went to school with?
Right. I've heard of that, and I've thought of that too. Maybe the only thing I could think of is maybe it's because it's not like, so they ran into Calvin Klein back in high school, and then it's not like their son was born and looked like a teenage Marty McFly. So
right. So it's the thought of like, okay, well, a bunch of time has passed. They didn't really have, they weren't in each other's lives for a long period of time. It was like a week maybe, or it was days, basically, that they kind of knew each other back in 1955. So perhaps...
I mean, So and so we're talking what? It's 30 years now. So from 1955 to 1985, it's 30 years. I guarantee you at some point when Marty was maybe growing a little bit and was maybe like 7 or 8 or 9, somewhere in that area, they probably thought, oh, wow, he looks a lot like that guy that we bumped into.
Yeah.
That Calvin Klein. And maybe they just went, whoa, that's funny. And then didn't think of it after that.
Do you think that George maybe would have been a little curious, thinking like,
suspicious?
I wonder if Lorraine bumped back into Calvin Klein again.
Yeah. Bumped back into or bumped uglies with?
Yes.
Yeah.
Both. So yeah, it's kind of.
I'm sure. You know what? I'm sure that was. I guess it depends on how trusting, like how much he trusts her. I mean, it has to have been in the back of his mind a little bit, I would think.
Right. Well, yeah. Who knows? Or he just maybe they're into that. I mean, they're much different people in the
at the end of the first movie.
The nicer, the newer 1985. Kind of on that same note, at the end of the movie, Calvin Klein, he tells them that his friends call him Marty or something like that. What does he say? Can't remember, but basically tells them like that, call him Marty or whatever. And Lorraine's like, oh, I really like that name, Marty. She likes that name so much that she names her first son Dave.
Oh yeah.
And her second son Marty. So apparently she likes the name Dave a little bit better.
Maybe she was just like, I mean, a lot of time went by.
Yeah.
So we know that some time went by since they started having children.
Right.
So I'm sure by the time it came to naming, I mean, they both met him. So they both would have been like, Marty, let's name him Marty.
Right.
So they had to bank on the chance that they would have another son at some point.
Right.
I never thought of that.
Or in this case again, since Marty looks so much like Calvin Klein and Lorraine wanted to name him Marty, would you as George not think she's naming him after his father?
Right. Yeah.
Which obviously isn't the case, but if you're George, you're like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, because if the first, I mean, it's these aren't real people that are related in the casting, but so obviously Dave doesn't look anything like George and I forget the
Lorraine.
sister's name.
Oh, I don't remember the sister's name either.
But she doesn't look anything like Lorraine, or like there's no resemblance in any of them. So, but in the reality of this movie, yeah, the one kid that ends up looking a lot like Marty, she wants to name Marty. Yeah, I'd be suspicious.
Right? So
not at first though.
Yeah,
not at first, because obviously if as a baby, it's going to look like a baby,
right?
And they're going to be like, oh yeah, Marty, the guy we bumped into and helped us fall in love. Yeah, let's name him Marty.
Yeah.
And
then as he gets older,
he's probably like, whoa.
George starts to get real suspicious.
I wonder if there's any point I don't think there's any point in the first movie where Marty gets his picture taken. Or like there'd be any sort of photograph that the McFlys would have.
Right. To compare
of Calvin
back to.
Klein.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I don't think that they would have. I don't think that happened in the movie at all.
Probably not.
But that would have really messed him up.
Yeah. So do you think that because George is now suspicious that Lorraine has cheated and had, Marty out of wedlock, do you think maybe that's why they keep her potential rapist Biff around? Like, why do they keep Biff around?
Why would they do that?
Why do they keep Biff around at all? Right? So Biff was a bully. And he tried to rape Lorraine.
Yep.
He at least assaulted her.
Yeah.
And yet, in the new 1985, he's just this, he's this lovable goon who tries to screw him over with the, he was just starting the second coat of wax. He didn't just finish it. Oh, Biff. Oh, that's Biff. And then he's coming into their house. Oh, this package just arrived, just coming on into their house. And they're just totally fine with, Lorraine's totally okay with the fact that this guy who assaulted her in high school, just hanging around with the family. He's just this lovable goof.
He's very close by.
Yep.
A lot. And I could see the original George McFly allowing Biff to hang around. Like Biff would have, like basically force himself, which he does, to stick around.
Right.
But the new George McFly is no longer a pushover. He stands up for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why is Biff
I'm
even around?
I'm blowing blowing your mind here today already.
My eyes.
I know.
My mind's eye.
I almost said eyes, and I almost said something else before that, and then eyes ended up putting out.
Yeah. There's no reason that like they should. I mean, back in the 50s, if a guy did something like that, I don't know how. I don't know how much it would have been addressed back then. It was probably just
boys will be boys.
Right.
Oh, that's what they do. They just assault women. It's fine.
And do you really think, honestly, if one guy punched Biff in the face and knocked him out, that he would turn into this cowardly little guy?
Exactly. That was another part of
it.
That was another part of this thing. It's just like,
okay.
And why did he become so tame and just like, oh, now I'm just this cowardly little whatever guy.
Right.
Because I got punched out one time.
George punches Biff.
Yep.
The next day at school, Biff is wailing on George.
Yep, exactly.
The dynamic of the bully I don't know how to say that, but bully victim relationship is not changed in reality.
Oh, not at all.
One punch is not going to make this difference.
If anything, George would maybe just have more, balls to stand up to him. And fight back a bit as opposed to just getting outright destroyed. Like he'd at least stand up for himself a bit more, but still in the end, they would not like each other and Biff would not have just become this meek little guy. Because
that movie basically says, hey kids, if you're getting picked on, just punch your bully once and then the tables will turn forever.
Everything will be just fine.
He'll end up working for you.
So hey, anybody listening to this, if you're getting bullied, just punch your bully. It'll go perfectly fine. Nothing bad could possibly happen.
Yeah. And make sure other people see it. Maybe that's the key thing.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Although I don't know if there weren't a lot of people around when he got punched.
There was a little bit because there was that one guy that was like, I think he stole your wallet in the
right.
I think that was in
the second
part
movie.
2. Yeah. So there was definitely people that
but it was
saw
the same.
So that's the other fucking thing is that he's potentially going to sexually assault Lorraine just when there's people fairly nearby.
Right. Well,
I mean, they didn't have window tinting.
Well, I mean, it's clear that Biff is feared and he can kind of runs the place. He can do whatever he wants at school. So I'm sure no one's going to stand. Because weren't there other people that kind of went by and just sort of nervously ran away because they knew what was going on, but they didn't want to do anything about it? Or am I making that up?
I'm not 100% sure on that.
Because I know just obviously when George first showed up, Biff was like, "Get out of here, McFly. This doesn't concern you." Like,
and he's like,
basically saying,
okay.
like, yeah. But I'm wondering if there's anyone else that there might have been other people. At least one shot of other people. Maybe not. I don't know. But who knows?
Well, if that's the case, the 50s were terrible.
Yeah, Biff was feared. No one was going to mess with Biff because they knew they were going to get beat up. But they're worried about themselves potentially getting beat up over this woman getting assaulted. Like their own, that's pretty sad. And the 50s are supposed to be more wholesome.
Right.
So what's next?
So Doc's house in 1955, he has this nice big lavish kind of house, right? But in 1985, he's living in this tiny little garage, which is the garage of that big house. There's newspaper clippings in a quick shot, and I don't know if people really necessarily pay attention to it, but it says basically something about Emmett Brown's house burning to the ground, and he collects a bunch of insurance money, and he sells the property. Like, that's all kind of like in there or whatever. So basically, what it's kind of inferring is that Doc Brown burnt down his house and and collected the insurance money, and then sold that part of the land to fund his research into making the time machine.
I mean,
so he's not a great person. Doc Brown wasn't really that great of a person. For the fact too that he cheated the Libyans out of plutonium.
Some plutonium.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that was established right at the beginning.
Yeah, that he's kind of
he's willing to do some shady stuff to make his invention possible. But I mean, let's just think about if someone was trying to invent a time machine and they really thought it was possible. That's a big deal. Like, you're going to probably do something you're not proud of to make that dream happen. Because what the funny thing about all of it is, it's not like Doc Brown became rich and famous, and even
Right.
no one seemed to know. He never seemed to make it known that he invented the time machine, except to Marty.
Yeah.
Marty was the only one he told.
And then Jennifer eventually finds out.
Right. So I wonder why he never made an announcement about this and got press for it and got rich and famous
because of all the stuff he talks about of like, you can't mess with you can't mess with the time, you can't mess with the past, you can't mess with the future, even though that's immediately what they go do.
I know. So why would he invent the time machine in the first place?
I think
if he knew
they
that
say
you couldn't do all these things.
He regrets it. He regrets it after all of the shenanigans that take place.
Yeah, it's because I forget which movie it is, but at some point he says that it has to be destroyed.
Right.
Maybe that was the third movie, because they do get it pushed off the. Oh no, the train goes off the cliff. At some point he says it has to be destroyed because it's doing no good. Like it's causing more harm than good. Maybe that was the second movie when the alternate 1985 happened.
Right. So speaking of the plutonium, so Marty obviously gives Doc Brown a note that he doesn't want to read because it basically tells him that, he's going to get killed or whatever. So then he ends up, doing what he's been speaking against the entire time about, changing the future or, doing anything in the past to change the future.
You can't know anything about your own future to cause problems.
So basically he gets told you're going to get killed. So he ends up wearing a bulletproof vest. How about instead of doing that, you either A, don't screw over the Libyans, B, don't get the plutonium and do all that. Because obviously your 1955 doc now knows all the shit that's going to happen. You could just be like, oh, well, the time machine was a bad idea. I'm just not going to invent it at all, which again causes other things to be problems later. As far as like, if he never invents it, then Marty never really goes back in time for him to learn all this information anyways.
Right.
But so he doesn't decide to change any of that. Instead, all he decides to do is just to wear a bulletproof vest so that they won't actually kill him. But the other problem is they used assault rifles, and the bulletproof vest he would have had to wear in order to not die from assault rifle shots at that range would have been very obvious. Like he would have been super padded.
Very bulky looking.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, did Marty say they only shoot you in the chest? Like, how do you know he wasn't going to get shot in the face? Like he took a big gamble of just like, I'll just wear a vest. They won't shoot me anywhere but mid mass.
So I get the bulletproof vest argument. The one he was going to need to defend against those bullets had to be way beefier. And how does he know he's not getting shot anywhere else? I will say about the letter, we don't know when Doc read the letter. We just know he read it.
True.
We didn't know he just decided to open it. Since Marty says it's about, because the way that's what I'm thinking. Because Marty says it's about the night I go back in time.
Right.
So he could have waited until that day to read the letter because it wouldn't have affected anything he did leading up to that day.
True.
Aside from the fact that he already knows he invented a time machine successfully because Marty went back in time.
Right. So yeah, that already, and the fact that he watched that video of, because Marty has the camcorder with the video, he sees that, so he already knew a bunch of other information anyways, which already alters the future.
He knew there was plutonium involved, obviously, because he says, Marty tells him, and that's why they have to do the lightning thing, because they can't get plutonium. Yeah.
You're segueing into so much of this for me. It's perfect. Keep going.
I like how he says, I can't know too much about my own future.
Right.
But he already knows he successfully invents a time machine, and he already knows he uses plutonium to do it. And I think he already knows he gets it from the Libyans. Mm-hmm. That might have been mentioned to him in the past as well. But anyway, that's what I say about that. We don't know when he opened the letter.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So you mentioned the clock tower, which is a very, very, you mentioned the lightning strike.
I said lightning strike, yep.
So the lightning strike on the clock tower, obviously, huge plot point.
Yep.
It's basically the whole end of the movie of them getting it all hooked up and everything. So
I have an idea. I might have an idea of what you're going to say, but we'll see.
So the only reason Marty knows of the timing of the lightning strike is because the clock gets stopped at that precise moment. So when they hook everything up and redirect the lightning to go down the line so that the car can hit it and get the power it needs to go back to the future. They redirected it so the clock no longer stops. So therefore, that negated Marty ever getting that letter, that flyer about save the clock tower that showed the time, the strike, and everything. Since the clock never actually ends up stopping, there would be no need to know. Nobody would have actually known the exact moment of that lightning strike. So therefore, he would never have known when he precisely needed to be there with the car to get back to the future. He basically screwed himself. He basically would have trapped himself back in time.
Well, the tricky thing, that's one of those things about time travel that you, unless it is possible to do it, you're not going to know how doing one thing is going to affect another.
Right.
Because obviously, before he ever went back in time, the lightning did stop the clock.
Mm-hmm.
And so the timing for when it happened was known, and it was in the records, it was in the newspapers and all that from the time. Yeah, this is one of those sort of
There's just, it's just
the time travel things you can't explain. But you're right. They see what I thought you were going to say was, I think, and I haven't watched it in a while, and I don't pay attention so closely when I watch it, but I know that they know the hour and the minute that the lightning strikes, but do they know the seconds? Because that's a long minute for lightning. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they might just know the hour and the minute that the lightning struck, but there's a whole minute where it could have happened.
Yeah, I don't think there's a second hand on that clock.
No, and the fact, and who's gonna know exactly when it happened on the second in that?
Well, if the clock stopped at that exact moment, but is the clock precisely on the? Is it right on exact time?
So I think.
And what if the clock would have been running slow that day, like it hadn't been? Updated or anything?
I mean, it was updated. It's a
maintenance. Sorry,
it's a maintain. Yeah, it's a I know it's mechanical. It's not on a battery. Wait a minute. Wouldn't lightning striking the clock only affect it if it was powered by some kind of battery? If it's a completely mechanical clock,
it had some sort of electricity going to it. I'm sure
it must have
run. Yeah, to run it might have been running a motor or something on it.
Yeah,
unless it was 100% still original, and they probably had to continue to crank it. Then at that point, no, unless it damaged it in some way.
Yeah,
we need to know more about this clock.
But I think that if I remember right, they only have the hour and the minute.
That's a good point
for timing. So there's a whole minute where it could have. There's no way. The odds of you having the hook touch the cable at the exact second is, nearly impossible. All right, what's next? Did I segue to the next part, or
this time you did not? Let's see, which one do I want to do
hoverboard.
Next? Well, that one I didn't write. That one I did. The hoverboard thing I didn't write down. But basically, there was one where it was just why is it okay to bring a hoverboard into the past, but not the almanac? Why does that not cause any issues as well? But obviously, the almanac can vastly change life like that. I mean, the hoverboard could as well if it went back in time and somebody discovered it and figured out its technology and all that. But
I mean, that's the same reason that you wouldn't be able to bring a time machine into the past.
True.
The time machine is already future technology getting brought into the past. So if you're okay with doing that, you might as well bring a hoverboard as well. Yeah. It's not going to cause any more harm.
Right.
But the almanac being brought into the past is it could be used for evil.
Very true.
But a time machine probably could too. Biff showed us that it could be.
So here's a question for you. Why do the people in the photograph fade? Why would the photograph itself not just either fade or disappear? And
because if they wouldn't have taken a picture of nothing.
Who's just going to take a picture of that scenery, right?
The whole
I was going to say the other thing is the whole fading away thing doesn't make sense. Either Marty succeeds or he fails. So either it's not a gradual thing. Yeah, either he's there until the end, or he fades, or he's just gone, or he never existed at all. And then that whole timeline that he's currently in wouldn't really actually ever have existed or occurred, because he would have never ended up coming back in time to affect that at all. It's muddy, but
No, but here's another thing that I'm not sure if this is on your list or not, but I just thought of it. Wouldn't realistically the children fade in reverse order?
You'd think so, yeah.
Marty's the youngest.
Yep.
So he would have, I think the children would have faded. Marty would have faded first, and then his sister, and then Dave.
Right.
And I guess this is all, the fading had to have started, like, let's say on that night, George and Lorraine kissed each other on the dance floor at, 11:15 p.m.
Right.
And then I'm guessing that the fading would have started for Marty after 11:15 p.m. because they hadn't kissed on time.
Right.
And then when they did kiss, he started to come back. But he would have, I think that they would have faded with Marty going first, and then the sister, and then Dave would have been the last kid to fade.
Right.
So now, does this mean that in 1985, his brother and sister had completely faded away by the time Marty started to fade in real life?
So, yeah, I mean, that kind of brings it to another different part of this, of what happens what's supposed to be happening in 1985 if somebody's traveling this way or that way. And that's going to come up a little later. But yeah, I mean, you would think so. But at the point of the movie where they're at in the movie, 1985 doesn't exist yet anyways. So it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah. All right. Go on.
All right. So if Marty comes back at the end of the movie to the new, better 1985, his family is, happier, that, they're more confident people, they have better jobs, they dress nice, all this stuff. So if that was as a result of what happened in 1955, two things. One, why do they still live in the same house if they're far more successful? Why do they still live in this kind of cruddy neighborhood?
Yeah.
In the same tiny house that they were living in before? And two, would Marty still be the Marty that he is? Would he have still grown up and been the same way? Or would he have been like less of like his whatever caused him to kind of go off and become friends with Doc in the first place? Would he have ever become friends with Doc in the alternate
Probably
new
not.
1985?
Probably not. So I'm wondering what this means, because the Marty that went back in time was from the unaffected 1985. You're right. Marty would have been born into the new version of what his life is going to be.
Right.
And then when he comes back to 1985, there either would have been the new Marty and then the original Marty, or the original Marty maybe would have just instantly changed to having
he should
the
have
memories of the new Marty.
Yep, he should either gain all the memories of what he should have had, or there should be two Martys.
So does that mean he would have lost basically any memory he would have had from his own childhood? The original original childhood wouldn't have existed. Right. Even maybe technically his memory of traveling through time might not have. He might have lost it all.
If it caused him to, if the change in 1955 caused a change for him to never become friends with Doc, then he should lose all the memories of time travel. But then that means he also never time traveled, which again is a huge paradox in the whole movie.
Right. So
basically, it's weird. What the movie's doing is anybody who does the actual time traveling, nothing affects them personally. Like, they still have their same memories and all this stuff. So there'd be like pictures of Marty at like parties he'd never actually gone to, or like, hanging out with people he doesn't actually know, or.
I would think, and I don't think this has been, I haven't seen every movie that covers time travel, but I would think that if you traveled back through time and did something that affected your own life and your own upbringing, that you would come back and have no memories of your original life. You would come back and you would instantly have just memories of the new life.
Yeah. Unless for some reason the person who travels through time does not somehow get affected by the changes that happen via the time travel. But it doesn't make sense.
But if Marty growing up then lived a completely different lifestyle, he would have those memories.
Yep.
And also the original life memories, like he would have two memories of two lives, basically.
Yeah, you'd think that he should at least have the new memories. But according to the way Back to the Future does it, he only has the memories of the life before time travel, and doesn't know anything about, I mean, because he comes in and immediately like, Dave, you're wearing a suit. What's this? The house is so nice. It's like, dude, take it easy. Calm down. They're going to think you're fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like, ease it in slow.
You know, it's funny. He's the one who just got done traveling through time, and he should be not shocked at all, or
right. But
he should just be like, more like an, oh wow, that's cool.
But that's the other thing, is like his family doesn't even question all these crazy things. They're like, he's like, but I totaled the car. And he's like, what? No, you didn't. Let's go out. They didn't question why he thought he totaled the car.
Yeah.
Or anything. They're not like
nothing.
Which he could have probably just been like, oh, I guess maybe, you know what? It was I had a bad dream that I totaled the car. And for some reason, it was just in my head that I actually happened. Like, he could have passed it off so easy. But no, instead they're just like, no, see, the car's right there. You didn't crash it. Not even questioning like why he thought that or anything.
I know. I mean, maybe you could just explain it by saying that they did kind of panic at first, and then once they saw that the car was fine, they're like, no, see, the car's fine. And maybe everybody was just sort of, in a state of calm then, and they weren't as worried about why he said it. They're just glad that it's not true.
Yeah,
maybe?
Who knows? So Doc is clearly all about science and doesn't give a shit about history. There's two different dates when he's giving examples of what he can do, or where they could travel. So one is like the birth of Christ, and he puts in December 25th, year 0. There's no such thing as a year 0, for one. And there's debate on when Christ was born, but that's whatever. But the other one is July 4th, 1776, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which is not the date that the Declaration of Independence was signed, but the date that was distributed on. And also, they're in California, and the car travels in time, but not in space. So they could travel to 1776 and arrive in California, nowhere near Philadelphia, and then then there's no paved roads to get from California to Philadelphia.
Yeah, he'd have to drive to Philadelphia.
Yeah, then travel.
Okay,
back in time.
Okay, here's what I'm going to defend Doc on that. He's just giving Marty examples.
I know, but the examples are incorrect.
He was not saying, I'm going to leave from here right now to go to witness the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, which happens in Philadelphia. He's just saying, hey, these are really cool things you can witness with time travel.
Yeah.
So give him a break.
But okay,
he's
so
excited.
I'll give him a break on the fact that those two events don't take place in California, but he also didn't put the correct dates in for the things he was referencing.
Right. Well,
that's kind of the main thing.
No, I know. And obviously the signing of the Declaration of Independence, that is something you could concretely learn and get the right date on.
Yeah.
The birth of Christ, you can't really.
Yeah, it's debatable.
That's a big goose chase on that one. A big crapshoot on.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to challenge anyone's beliefs, but what if there was no Jesus Christ and you go back there and you're,
Well, there's allegedly, there's allegedly a person.
Right.
Jesus of Nazareth was a real person. Whether or not he was the son of God is where you can definitely debate it. But all right, two last ones for the first movie here.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, we're still on the first movie. There's far less. There was a lot for the first movie. It dwindles down here as we go forward.
So they clean things up. They clean things up better for the second and third movies, right?
Yes and no. I don't know why there was just so many about the first one, and I'm sure there's more that we could, discover about the second one that I'm just not seeing. But do you think that George McFly could get into some sort of legal battle with the creators of Star Wars and Star Trek for the fact that they used Darth Vader and Vulcan after he had met an alien named Darth Vader from Vulcan?
Only if. I mean, no, because that's not.
Do you think it's weird? Do you think it would be weird for him? All of a sudden, he's like, "Wait a second, these two guys must have also been visited by Darth Vader from Vulcan."
Right, that could be because George McFly did not create those names.
Right, but he's got to. So, you got to think because George McFly writes his book after the TV series came out and after the movies came out. So he's got to be So if he used that name in his book, clearly, but you got to think like in the amount of time from when he got visited by this alien that plays Van Halen riffs on on a fucking.
Well, yeah. What
whatever.
about the first time you heard that song from Van Halen?
Well, that's not a real song by Van Halen. That's just Eddie Van Halen wrote that guitar riff for the movie.
Oh, okay.
It's just an Eddie Van Halen guitar riff. But yeah.
So then, where did
you think George is like? Wait a second.
Where did Marty get that? So Marty McFly must know Eddie Van Halen in this universe.
Yeah, apparently.
Eddie Van Halen probably did know Calvin Klein. We could say that.
I'm fairly certain. I'd have to read up again. I'm fairly certain that Eddie Van Halen wrote that guitar riff for the movie. I'm like 80% sure at this point now. Now I'm questioning myself, but I thought I read that somewhere. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry.
Well, if I don't really care. If he did, then
that's another thing.
There wouldn't be a version of that Marty would have had access to,
right? Unless he just it's not like he could download it off the internet at that time in 1985.
No.
Unused Van Halen riffs.
That they published.
All right, and then the last one is I'm gonna kind of why is it Doc Brown, who owns a time machine, is always running late, and also why do they intentionally always cut things so close? Marty's like 10 minutes ought to do it to save Doc, and then when they're like, and then this is how we're segueing into the second movie. When they go to retrieve the sports almanac. They just go right when old Biff shows up or right after he shows up. It's like,
I know.
Go either just before he gets there or wait until after he gets there. So there's, and then get it off of Biff when he's taking a shit or something,
Yeah.
When he can't just defend himself.
I see the strategy in trying to get to the almanac right when Biff gets it for a couple reasons. One, so Biff doesn't have a chance to read through it and even keep any mental notes of any of these events.
Right.
Sporting events. The second is they're getting to it before he has a chance to lock it up and make it more difficult to get to.
Yeah, so that's definitely the one concern. But then the other thing is then, why don't you, I guess maybe they didn't exactly know. Did they know? Yeah, they did know the precise time that he went, right? Because it was still on
it would have been in the
dash of the car. So they set it for 20 minutes before. You like to cut shit close, do it 10 minutes before he arrives there, so that when he arrives, you just attack the elderly, feeble man and get the almanac back.
Yeah, but I do like how Marty, in the same sentence, in the same breath, he's like, wait a minute, I've got all the time I need. I've got a time machine. 10 minutes ought to do it. And then he's got to rush. He's got to rush to get to the mall.
A car that clearly had a starter issue just prior to all of this.
Right.
As well.
Right.
Like that couldn't possibly happen again.
Before we get into the second movie, the very beginning of the first movie is Marty showing up at Doc's place, and he sees that all this stuff is everywhere. Like his house is a mess, and he ends up calling, or I think either Marty calls him or Doc calls his own house, and Marty picks up. I forget which one it was.
Right.
But he says, that this is stuff that's just written to make the next thing happen in the movie. But Doc's experiment, where all the clocks go off,
right?
They're exactly 25 minutes slow. What kind of experiment is that? You just set all the clocks back 25 minutes, and then they were all 25 minutes slow. And the fact that they stayed slow was proof that your experiment worked. What is this experiment? That all the clocks are set back 25 minutes or 20 minutes, whichever it was.
I'm not sure, but
I've always wondered, what is the point of this experiment? Yeah, go ahead.
But no, what that leads to is the fact that then Marty's like, what? Oh, I'm going to be late for school. It's like,
right. It's a reason for him.
Did you not look at a clock before? Like Marty had to already know he was running late for school before he went to Doc's house.
Right.
Seeing the clocks at Doc's and then realizing that they're 25 minutes slow should not been his indication that he was running late for school already.
So he skateboarded over to Doc's house.
Right.
I mean, unless the first time he ever looked at a clock that day was at Doc's house, but he's got an alarm clock. We know he has an alarm clock,
right?
Because he woke up in the middle of the night to go meet Doc at the mall,
right?
When Doc was going to show him the time machine. So the only way that works is if he just didn't look at any other clock until he got to Doc's house.
Which doesn't make sense, because if you have to go to school,
Yeah.
So put yourself back in 1985.
When I was skateboarding to school.
When you were skateboarding to school.
At 3 years old.
So put yourself back in high school. Here at High School Famous, we like to talk about high school. Put yourself back in high school. You're getting up for the day, and you are going to stop at your friend's house before school.
Sure.
Do you just leave all willy-nilly, not sure what time it is?
I mean,
You look at a clock. You definitely need to know, like, do I have enough time to stop at my friend's house before school? Did Marty all of a sudden, like, he leaves his house to go to Doc's, and he gets to Doc's, he's like, man, I got here really fast. Like,
yeah, it's
almost
like
no time has passed.
I got here before I left.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. Depending on how close he lives, I got here before I even left my place. This is insane. I immediately would have been like, oh crap, wait, something's not right here. I left my house at 8:30. It takes me no less than 10 minutes to get here, and it's now saying it's 8:15 or some shit.
Yeah.
I've clearly something wrong.
Yeah, I never thought of that part
one.
of it.
I didn't write that one down, but that was one that was in the
head?
works. Yeah. All right. So Back to the Future Part 2, Sean. We've worked our way into that. I've got a few for this one.
Before we continue, sorry so far, but
spoilers.
Spoilers for the Back to the Future trilogy. In case
yeah.
I mean, from what I understand, we have some listeners that are younger. It's very possible they haven't seen this. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll also put a spoilers in the description of the episode.
Yeah. So anyway, it's very possible that some people listening to this have not seen this or even heard of this trilogy.
Well, if they've never heard of it, then they don't deserve to listen to this podcast.
Okay.
But I hope they still do. I hope they still do.
Let's do that. Yeah.
I want them to continue to listen to it.
Let's shame the small amount of listeners we have.
I want them to keep listening, but they don't deserve it.
Just know that kids.
Yep. You don't deserve to listen to this, but please keep listening.
Yeah. Keep listening, but feel bad about it every time you do.
Yes. So first and foremost, Biff should have never been able to return back to that 2015 after he brought the sports almanac back and altered the future. After he went back to 1955 and altered.
He would have come back to an altered 2015. He would have came to an
altered 2015.
Oh, all right. Good point.
Some people say that gets slightly explained away by the fact that Doc says something about how changes in time happen in waves, so they don't happen instantaneously. But it's like, that's a, 50-year wave? 60-year wave?
But still.
It's instantaneous. I mean, the time that passed is instantaneous for them specifically, but from the time from 1955 back to that point, it's been 60 years.
Yeah.
It should have been instantaneous. There shouldn't be this things happen in waves.
Here we go. Here's why old Biff returned to the original 2015. By the time he returned, Doc and Marty had already fixed it. They already went back and fixed and prevented. No, that doesn't make sense.
No, because they changed that 2015 anyway. I like that logic though. That was some good thinking for a second there.
I
was on your side for a second.
Then I realized
this makes sense.
Then I realized my argument doesn't work.
All right. Well, before that, how does Biff even know how to use the time machine? Why is Biff suddenly? Yeah. Why is Biff smart?
Yeah, you're right.
When the plot calls for it.
Yeah, I mean it's laid out pretty simply as far as maybe how to punch in the time you want to go to, but he would have just had to have figured out that he has to go 88 miles per hour. And what if he never does? What if he never reaches 88 miles per hour?
Right.
It never would have worked, and he would have
just
been
been punching buttons, thinking like, "All right, which button gets me to time travel?"
Yeah.
And then he just gets frustrated and just speeds off and just starts flooring it.
I know. I guess the only way that would have worked is if he got frustrated and just decided to floor it, and then poof, it just happened to go 88 miles per hour. A very feeble old man driving 88 miles per hour in a car that was built in the 80s, and it's now 2015.
Right.
Right.
But the car, the car hasn't technically aged in any of that time.
No, I know, but Biff doesn't know that.
True.
Well, he does know it's a time machine, but for all he knows, this could have been a car that didn't travel to 2015.
True.
It could have been that it was just there. It could have been a 60-year-old car to him.
Right.
And the fact that he's just going to, as old as he is.
It wouldn't have been a 60-year-old car.
Well, whatever.
But a 30-year-old car.
30. I was, yeah.
Yeah.
But the fact that he is going to just get it to 88 miles per hour at his age and how old that car could have been in his mind. Very unlikely.
And I guess the other thing is that he does have a time machine, so he technically could have taken all the time he wanted to make any of that happen.
He would have had all the time in the world to stumble upon the way to get back in time, I guess.
Yeah. Let's see. So Doc tells Marty and Jennifer that they need to go to the future with him to basically, there's something wrong with their kids.
He's got to stop his kid from doing something stupid.
And they say, they are like, oh, what's wrong? What are we okay or whatever? And he says, no, you two are fine. It's your kids. We go to the future. They're not fine. Marty's in a dead end job. He can't play music anymore because he hurt his hand. He loses his job. Jennifer's resentful because they got eloped in Vegas. Like, they're not happy by any means, but Doc's just like, you guys are fine. Nothing's wrong with you. You're fine. It's your kids. It's like, no, their lives kind of suck.
I mean,
or they're less than fine, let's say.
What's weird is because he's not gonna, his goal isn't to make it so that Marty's rich and well-to-do.
Right.
I guess maybe Doc doesn't want to interfere with that part of their life. They're going to get where they're going to get to on their own.
But Doc shouldn't interfere at all.
Well, for some reason he feels compelled to make why doesn't this whole thing doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
He's trying to prevent Marty Jr. I think it was Marty Jr.
Yeah.
From just getting into legal trouble.
Right.
Did he say that event caused like a chain of reaction of things that makes their whole family?
I don't remember.
I think that he says that single event causes this big chain reaction that basically makes their family crumble or something. Maybe that's why he's invested in it not happening.
He's so adamant in the first movie about not making changes, not doing this, doing that. But he's so quick to like, no, we got to go stop this event from happening because it ruins this event later. It's like,
what?
You're doing the exact thing that you said not to do.
Here's the only thing I can think of that maybe would explain why he would have this mentality. He's worried about going to the past and affecting the present that they know of.
Yeah.
Right? This is him going into the future and affecting something that happens even after that future. So it's like, I'm not worried about how that's going to affect me because my present is not going to be changed. And probably the rest of most of my life is not going to be affected by this tampering.
Yeah, but he's still that's
still going against his rules.
That's a selfish time traveler.
yeah, he's going against his rules, but he's not. It's in a way that's not going to affect his own life, right. Or even Marty's young adult life. It's going to affect him afterward, but he's trying to affect him for the better. Yeah, where's the line then? Like, you're willing to alter the natural course of time to prevent this one bad thing from happening
to one family,
right? But you're allowing this. You're still allowing this friend that you obviously care a lot about and his family to just sort of live mediocre lives. Where's the line? Like, why aren't you making it so that Marty never gets into that car accident or whatever that affects his hand? Yep. And whatever else.
Well, he does that himself. He makes that choice himself at the
He did,
the end.
yeah. But why isn't Doc doing something to stop that from happening?
Right.
Marty just cares about that decision on his own.
He cares about Marty's offspring, not Marty.
We don't ever see Marty changing his mind about racing that guy. We don't ever see how that affects his life in the future.
Right, because his future is unwritten at that point.
Oh, that's right. But
which is such a cop-out.
Yeah.
It's like, not according to everything we've just watched in these three movies. His future is definitely written. It's just not the same. Now we don't know. And since the time machine's now destroyed, I mean, I guess that's maybe the way of saying it. It's like, well, the time machine's destroyed, even though I just made this new one out of a locomotive. So therefore, your future is what you make it at this point.
Yeah. Maybe that's what he's saying.
Dude, if I was Marty at that point, I'd be like, all right, I need to be super cautious because everything I do can make or break my future at this point. He would just become such a like nervous freaking like
it would
like,
probably be crippling.
Yeah,
to
know that like, okay, well, I do know it can get real bad
and anxiety.
So what can I do to make it really good? And you'd become so meticulous in every choice you make that it would just probably it'd cripple you.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to come to a decision.
Oh, that'd be that's messed up.
You'd end up getting committed like Doc Brown did in the alternate 1985.
Oh. Nice segue, Sean. If Doc Brown got committed in the alternate 1985, therefore he could not create the time machine. Therefore, the time machine should not exist. Therefore, undoing everything that happens and making the alternate 1985 the new reality going forward.
So, yeah, because in the first movie, things that happened in the past that affect the future were causing Marty to fade away. The time machine would have faded away, right?
Yep.
This is another one of those things. It's kind of like the reading the letter. Where in 1985 does Doc get committed, before or after he invents the time machine? I don't know if it specifies in that movie.
But that shouldn't matter, because if it's before, then clearly the time machine doesn't exist. If it's after, then it's still before he shows Marty how to use the time machine, because he gets killed immediately after he shows Marty how to use the time machine.
But how do we know that? We don't know that.
Because that's what the events would have been in the original 1985, right?
But the original 1985 has already been altered because Doc Brown wore a bulletproof vest and didn't get killed.
So basically, the only way it would be then is if he gets committed after the events from the original movie of Marty at least going into the past, right? And then Marty coming back, Doc living, and then Doc would have had to get committed after that.
Sometime after that.
So somehow something happens because Biff had him committed, right?
I think so.
I'd have to remember exactly. So yeah, I guess that's the only way it would possibly work.
And I think he had him committed because he would have been the one who would have known that the almanac was from the future.
Right. But hey, here's the thing. So then, using that logic, the only way Biff could save himself and still get the almanac to himself is he would have to have Doc committed after he got back from 2015, which that was when they first got back from 2015. He would have had to been committed right then and there, because otherwise he would have never gone to the future, and thus the almanac would have never gotten back to the past.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. Here's another time travel.
I love the paradoxes though, because they're so interesting and they just blow it all out of the water.
Because you're right. It's another thing. It's the same thing with with Marty going back to 1985. Now that his dad is not a big pushover, and he has a better life. There's either going to be two Martys, or the Marty that gets back to 1985 is greatly affected.
Right.
Doc Brown. He either comes back to 1985, the alternated one, and he's in the nut house, or there's two Doc Browns.
Yep.
There's the one that's been committed, and then there's the time traveling one. So it must be that there's a Doc Brown that's in the nut house that's been committed, and then the time traveling Doc Brown is the one that there had to have been two Doc Browns.
Right.
There had to have been.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what they're kind of inferring with the movie is that.
Right, because he can't discover in a newspaper that
this timeline's Doc Brown is there. I mean, the movies kind of end up unintentionally doing kind of what Avengers did, where they're like, well, when you change something here, it just breaks off into its own timeline. So there's alternate timelines are all happening, but the movie's still trying to make you be like, no, it's one timeline, and it doesn't really work.
Right, and so in the alternate 1985, there would have been two Martys.
There would have had to have been.
Marty doesn't just show up to the alternate 1985, and then the Marty that's been living that life, it just doesn't get canceled out.
Right.
I suppose that could be said the same for the end of the first movie.
Well, and that's where it has to make sense for the fact that when they go to 2015, there's two Martys there. There's the 2015 Marty, and now there's the 1985 Marty. So it shows that two Martys can exist in the same place at the same time. So therefore, when they're going back and forth, there's got to be two Martys and two Docs. Yeah.
Do you want an endgame thing that no one seems to talk about? An endgame paradox?
Sure, toss it in real quick.
Okay. The what's her face? Tilda Swinton's character,
Yeah.
the whatever one, I forget what she was called. She says to Bruce that the Infinity Stones create what you experience as the flow of time, right?
Okay.
All of the Infinity Stones, right?
I think the Time Stone would do that.
You would
But
think
yeah.
just the Time Stone would do that, but that's not even part of it.
Okay.
But and if changing the past doesn't change the future, Thanos destroyed all of the Infinity Stones.
Okay.
So therefore, the flow of time would no longer be happening.
Interesting.
So even though they went back in time to get the Infinity Stones to undo the snap or whatever, the stones are still destroyed.
Right.
Because they returned them all to their original, they returned them all to, right? So that it wouldn't affect their timelines. But in the timeline that they're in, there are no more Infinity Stones. They don't exist anymore.
Right.
So the flow of time must not be anymore. Because the stones created the flow of time.
At least in that timeline, yeah.
Right. So either the understanding of the Infinity Stones was incorrect and they just were lucky that way, or there's this huge unexplained thing that no one seems to bring up about that movie. Because they're all concerned about, whoa, what happened when Cap ran into Red Skull at what's the place, and how do you get the ether back into Jane Foster? That would have been weird. You know, they care about those things, but what?
No, just how to get it back into her. That's gross.
Well,
I was just like, I don't know. I'm sure he didn't put it back in her. I'm sure he just returned it somehow. Returned here's the.
No,
ether.
it was because they pulled it from within her body, and so to return it to not affect the timeline, he had to have put it back into her body somehow.
Interesting.
Yeah,
you pull her off into a dark corner somewhere.
And how do you, with the whole soul stone thing,
for both of us.
With the whole soul stone thing, how do you give it back?
Yeah, but do you get the sacrifice back?
Right?
Like, we'd like to return this. I have the receipt.
Yeah. Well, did you use it? Well, yeah. Well,
you can't return it. Yeah.
Right.
You can't return it. It's been used.
The sacrifice was to get it, to use it for something. And if you used it for that thing, you can't get the sacrifice back. Maybe that's the rule with that.
Probably. So,
back to the Future 2.
When Marty and Jennifer leave 1985 to go to 2015, they technically should not exist in 2015 at that time at all, because they left their present, so therefore their timeline stops at that point.
Well, then Doc wouldn't have existed either.
Right. So there's a back and forth on this one of whether that makes sense or not. And so basically the thing that kind of breaks it is just they intend to go back to their timeline, so therefore their future should still exist, even though they're currently not, even though they currently left their timeline and jumped forward, which then at that point their existence in that timeline should no longer keep moving forward because they're not there anymore. So therefore they should not exist after that point in time until they arrive in whatever time they go to. So the only argument back against that is that since they do go back in time to their timeline to continue living, that's way they can still exist in the future at the same time that they're in the future. It's kind of a weird thing.
I see what you mean though.
Yeah. But I had to read that one a couple times to really kind of get what they were saying at it.
Until you just finished, I didn't really know what you were talking about. But
I kind of sensed it, so I'm just like, let me keep explaining.
Then I picked it up. Yeah, it's hard to say because I guess that just shows you in a way that they would have successfully gotten back to 1985 no matter what.
Yeah, which then again goes back to the thing where we talked about in the first one is either the photo disappears or the photo stays.
Or it stays.
Either he succeeds or he fails.
Right.
It can't. You can't have both. You can't have this we might be failing. It's no, he's either going to succeed or he's going to fail, and either everything ceases to exist or it continues to exist.
All right.
Last one for the second movie. Future Marty and future Jennifer should have known their past selves were going to show up.
Yes, they should have.
Because the two Jennifers bump into each other, and yeah, one of two things could have happened. Either everything would have ceased to exist, or they would have fainted, and they fainted. Which doesn't happen to Biff when Biff meets other Biff, but whatever.
Oh, yeah. So Okay. Oh.
It's just a way for the movie to show you how fragile women are.
Oh, don't do that. So, here's my, okay, I can justify this.
Okay. I want to hear it.
Okay. Old Jennifer is not expecting to see young Jennifer. And old Jennifer is going to know that's young me because I was me then, right?
Yep.
This is old Biff meeting. This is old Biff going to seek out young Biff.
Right.
So young Biff does not recognize old Biff as himself because he does not know what he's going to look like as an old man. The reverse happens with Jennifer. So
but the two Jennifers both say, like, she's
I'm
like,
young,
I'm
old.
young, I'm old. So she recognizes her older self.
Right.
I guess there's less of a time distance between their ages, maybe, because there's a 60-year difference between young and old Biff. But there's only a 30-year difference between young and old Jennifer.
Yeah.
So maybe, and he does also pass it off of like, I'm an old relative or some shit too.
Yep.
And Biff is supposed to be dumb when the plot's convenient for it.
Right. And Biff, yeah. I think it's highly unlikely that if Biff saw a 60-year older version of himself, that he's going to know that that's an old me. Like, you know what I'm saying? I think since it's old Biff going to see young Biff intentionally versus young Jennifer is aware of the older Jennifer. It's the reverse of the scenarios.
Right.
So I can see that being sound.
Right.
Nothing to debate.
Yeah.
Nothing to challenge on this.
But also in that sense, now Jennifer 2015 Jennifer should know that she bumps into her younger self, and therefore should no longer be shocked and faint.
This is
and they both should know that they're going to show up and be in the timeline, so they could basically be like, all right, we're here, let's help out. You know, they can help out with whatever they're trying to actually do.
Okay, this is similar to the point I made a long time ago. I don't know if I ever told you this. I'm sure I did. About when in the first movie when Doc bumps into him, the 1955 Doc.
Right, he should have fainted.
This must have been the second movie. This was the second movie. This was this movie.
Yep.
1985 Doc bumps into 1955 Doc and hands him the wrench or whatever that, you know. So at that point, Doc would have instantly had two versions of that same memory.
Yes.
He would have had the memory of someone he bumped into a guy that handed him the wrench, and also him handing the younger self the wrench.
Right. And therefore would have been like, wait a second, turned around, saw himself. Because then he would have known, like, oh, I handed myself that thing. Crazy.
But it's the 1985 version of Doc that would have had the two versions of the memory. The 1955 version still just has some guy handing me a wrench.
Right.
So
it would have basically been at that point that he would have realized he handed himself the wrench. Gotcha.
Right. So 2015 Jennifer wouldn't have had the memory of bumping into 1985 Jennifer until the moment she bumped into 1985 Jennifer. That doesn't make sense.
Nope, because 1985 Jennifer would have remembered she saw herself. So then from there forward, she will always have the memory of, oh man, I come into the future and I bump into myself and then I faint. I can avoid fainting this time because I know what's going to happen.
You're right. It's weird because it's like she couldn't have possibly had the memory of it happening until it happened, but the old version would have had the memory of it happening because by the time she becomes the 2015 Jennifer, she would have known. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, you can't talk your way out of that one.
All right, for the last movie, I just got 3.
Okay.
So because we're already running a little long here.
Whatever.
So which order do I want to do these in? All right. So basically, once Doc sends Marty a letter from 1885.
Yep.
To 1955, where Marty's stranded.
Right.
And tells him where to find the DeLorean so that he can get back to 1985. Basically saying, leave me here. Right. I'm doing fine.
I want to stay here.
You get home. But Marty obviously is like, screw it. I'm gonna go find 1955 Doc, who just sent me back to my timeline from the first movie. Mm-hmm. Bump into him. I'm back from the future. Blah blah blah.
Blah blah blah. Yeah.
Help me fix the DeLorean up, and so I can go back to 1885 and save you because we find out that you're gonna get killed you're going to get murdered. So now I want to go save you from being murdered. So here's the first thing. Both 1955 Doc and 1985 Marty, it's always 1985 Marty pretty much. They both realize...
there's a 2015 Marty, but that's... Yeah.
Right. They both realize that 1985 Doc, who is stuck in 1885, is going to be killed by Buford Tannen. So Doc now knows he's going to get killed. Therefore, Doc should have that memory and be able to avoid getting killed.
That's true.
By just paying the $80 and being done with it. Right? Or never taking the job in the first place or whatever it is to avoid getting killed. True. So Doc should be able to avoid his own death by knowing that he's going to die. And he shouldn't care because he's already done it once.
Yeah.
I accidentally segued into that one because I was getting to a different point originally. Okay. So Marty ends up going to 1885, which against 1985 Doc's wishes.
Right.
Wrecks the DeLorean because an arrow goes in the gas tank and whatever. So they don't have any fuel and gasoline hasn't been invented yet.
Right.
So they have to try to fix it or do whatever, and they end up, pushing it with the train and stuff. So once Doc realizes that Marty comes back to 1885, why couldn't he just alter the note or send an additional note to tell Marty to bring some supplies?
Like bring gas or bring some stuff to fix it.
Right? They could have instantaneously changed their timeline by sending a new note before Marty leaves to come.
He also could have just sent a note that says, "Give it come a day ahead of where you came, because then you wouldn't have run into that battle."
Right.
You wouldn't have run into that battle at all.
A day before or a day after.
That would have been a more constructive thing to do versus still show up in the middle of the battle, but then send supplies to fix the DeLorean. He should have just said, "Come back this time," because...
right.
Yeah.
The alternate to that is, in 1885 now, there's two DeLoreans. Because the DeLorean gets put in the mine shaft. Marty uncovers it in 1955. When he goes back in time, the DeLorean should still be in the mine shaft. So they could have technically used...
They could have just dug out the one in the mine shaft
and used it for parts, which then could create a new paradox for the fact that then Marty wouldn't have been able to travel back in time to do that in the first place. But there's arguments around that also.
Well, it also depends on when Doc hides it, right? So it would have been already hidden because Doc...
It would have been because Doc was there.
Marty came not long before Doc was supposed to have been getting shot.
Right.
So Doc would have already had the time machine hidden in the mine shaft.
Well, and it wouldn't have mattered either way, because either way, the DeLorean's in the past. So even if it wasn't in the mine shaft, they could still get the DeLorean and use it for parts.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
And we've already established that changing certain things doesn't alter what's going on currently anyways, so they could have just done it and it wouldn't have changed the fact that then Marty wouldn't have been able to get there, blah, blah, blah. But any parts they would have stripped from it to fix the current DeLorean, they could have just, fixed in 1955 with, so if he would have stripped parts off of it and then say, now the DeLorean doesn't have those parts, so when Marty's in 1955, the DeLorean's going to be stripped of all those parts, they could have just gotten new parts and fixed the DeLorean. So either way, they could have probably made it work. Also, Doc could have just made gasoline.
Yeah.
Because because they can make gasoline off of byproducts from kerosene, and kerosene was definitely around in 1855.
He could have made
Doc
gasoline.
could have literally made his own gasoline.
Yeah, he's sitting there like he's bound to the rules.
He made a refrigerator or a freezer.
Yeah, he's making all these things that didn't exist back then. Why couldn't he have just made gasoline?
Right.
And then he ends up making a time machine out of a train. So, there's a lot of that doesn't make sense.
Right? Yeah. Where did he get anything to be able to make that, like, I guess...
I'm curious.
No, because unless he must have stripped parts off of the other DeLorean. He must have gone back to the mine shaft and used the flux capacitor and stuff off of the other DeLorean that was still... And then that's what got... Yeah, then he had to use that on the train.
But I bet you when he did that,
train, because the first train went into the ravine.
Yeah, so he must have used a different train. He didn't use that.
Yeah, it was definitely a different train. But then, so first he would have had to at least get that train to be able to time travel in the first place to far enough into the future where he could have gotten all the technology that train ends up having on it when he comes back to 1985 at the end of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole thing there's the other issue I had with the whole Clayton Ravine thing.
Yeah.
And now I can't remember what it is. It's like I think she was heading to town to see him. If I'm not mistaken, she was heading to town to see him in
Originally?
1885.
No, I think she was moving to that town.
Was that what it was?
And that's when they first met, was when he saved her.
Oh, wait a minute.
Because then he finds out what her name is and realizes he's immediately altered the future again.
Yeah. But there's something that I'll have to watch the movie again, because there was something I had on that about the only reason that she was heading toward the ravine was because of something that Doc and Marty did in 1885. So she never would have fallen off that ravine or the cliff in the first place, and the ravine never would have been named after her.
So you think the whole reason she was heading to town in the first place was something about Doc?
Either that, or the whole reason that the horses got spooked and they ended up running her off into the ravine was because of something they did. I think.
Oh yeah, we'll have to watch it again.
I'm gonna watch the movie again, and I'm gonna have it ready for next time.
Okay.
But I know I had an issue with that after watching it once.
Right. Because then it gets to the point. Yeah, then it gets to the point where, do you think anything they're doing? Yeah, and then it gets to the point of the fact that, like, well, all of this had to have always happened.
Right.
But then again, that doesn't make sense, because then they would have immediately saved her. So it's like, yeah, if something they did is what caused the horses to get spooked, then that means they had to have been there. They had to have always been there to cause that originally. But then they saved her, which means that would have also always happened. So it doesn't make sense anywhere. Yeah.
So in order for all this to work, is like everything past, present, and future has already happened.
Basically, yeah. It basically, yeah. I don't know. It's not really saying that, because it'd be like
you can't.
It'd be saying that everything they're doing is all predestined anyways, and even though they think they're changing things, they're actually just doing things as they're already supposed to have happened.
Yeah.
Which
means Doc saying your future is unwritten is not true.
Well, I already say that's not true. I already say that in the logic of the movies, that's already not true, because we've already been shown this entire time that your future is definitely pre-written. It's just now you do not have access to find out what it is, and you don't know what it is. But then again, like we already said, it's going to ruin Marty's life, because now he's going to be so worried about what could possibly happen in his life to shape his future, that he's going to just be way too scared to do anything.
He's not going to be able to make any decision about anything ever again.
Yeah, and then somebody's going to call him a chicken, and this time he's just going to let it. It's going to let it sit.
He's going to let it go. Yeah, but that's making a decision.
Ooh,
that's making a decision. Do I let someone calling me chicken affect me or not? That's a decision in itself.
Ooh, the decision to not make a decision is a decision.
It is.
All right. Well, bye.
That's
a good place to end. What do you got?
I skipped it. We skipped it last week, but okay. We have a listener submitted tongue twister.
Do we really?
We have a listener submitted tongue twister, and it was sent to me before last week, but we didn't do a tongue twister last week.
Do we want to say who the listener is? Does the listener want to be recognized? Or are you gonna have to send a text message to find out?
Well, I was gonna joke and give a false name that would probably clue you into the real name. The listener who submitted this tongue twister is named Kim Jersey.
Okay.
Also known as Jim Clearsey. And I thought this would be fun.
Well, thank you very much, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So we're going to do that. So what happened was, when he sent it to me, I read it then, but I haven't looked at it since. And so I just copied and pasted it into there. So it's kind of like we're both reading it cold. And so if people want to submit to us tongue twisters, it would be both of us reading it cold for the first time instead of just Matt. Because I always seem to have the upper hand on the tongue twisters because I write them.
And I'm lazy.
If people want to submit their own to us, then it's equal playing field. So it's in the tongue twisters doc.
I got it up.
So do you want me to go first, or do you want
for it?
Should I go first?
Go for it.
Frank Finkelstein finds fancy friends fabulous for far-flung fun.
You did. I think you did all right.
I almost stumbled on something, but yeah.
All right. So Frank Finkelstein finds fancy friends fabulous for far-flung fun. I almost did that one.
You said far-flung.
That's the hardest part. For far-flung fun.
Yeah.
That's the hard part for sure. Frank Finkelstein finds fancy friends fabulous for far-flung fun. Yeah. Going from far to flung to fun, that's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Thanks, Jim. We appreciate that. We love that we got that because we want more feedback. We want more listener submitted stuff. One person did tell me that they enjoyed us just chatting and did not miss the news at all. They said not having the news in was just fine. They actually just really enjoyed hearing us talk to each other. So that's cool.
So that's how your mom feels?
No, it wasn't my mom.
Oh.
But no, my mom stopped. I think my mom started to feel like she was like she was being too much. She was like being too much about it. So I think she's kind of stepped back and hasn't really said much to me about it lately. I'm assuming she's still listening. I have no idea. But no, that wasn't my mom who said that. But yeah, so I think we definitely will do news again. I just don't think we're going to do it every time like we were. Because I think it was too much of the driving force for every single episode. It was getting to the point where sometimes the news portion was almost taking like over half of the entire episode.
Over half, yeah. I mean, that leads us to occasionally,
yeah. I mean, occasionally that works when we don't really have anything planned for the episode. But it also, I think that allows us to be too lazy sometimes too, of the fact that we're like, well, let this kind of drive it since we didn't plan anything. It's like, no, we need to come up with some actual material here and there. So that's why, I wanted to do this because I thought it was kind of fun and interesting. I thought it brought up some fun conversation. So again, sorry, we forgot to mention spoilers at the top of the show. But for anybody who hasn't seen this now over 30-year-old movie, I mean, statute of limitations on spoilers hits a point.
Yeah, I guess there's nothing probably officially established on that, but there has to be a statute of limitations on spoilers. So yeah. Also, I thought it'd be fun if anyone wants to just submit any questions about us. Then we can do a little bit where we'll answer emails that are sent to us asking questions about Matt and myself. When we can choose to answer honestly or make something up on the spot. But yeah, if you care to,
depending on the question,
write in any questions you might have about us if you want to know more about us, and we can do a listener's question and answers type of a thing.
That'd be fun. Yeah, that would be real fun.
I think that'd be fun.
Yeah,
and then if you never hear us talk about it again, it means that no one sent anything.
But don't send those. Don't send those to us personally. If you know us personally or anything, please email them to us or Instagram or whatever else we have. Facebook, all that stuff. It's tagged at the end.
Twitter, through the official podcast channels.
We would love any feedback you're going to give us at all. Obviously, you can just, if you know us, you can message us personally and just be like, hey, I really liked this. But we do definitely want to get some feedback through our socials and our emails and stuff like that. So any user submitted questions, please put them through our socials or our email. That would be amazing.
Any listener submitted tongue twisters as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And Amanda.
Yeah, make the topic of the what do they call that? The subject. Yeah, make the subject either tongue twisters or questions or
Q&A.
something. Q&A.
Q&A maybe.
Something that will clue us into what the email's about ahead of time. I'm not expecting to get floods and floods of emails in that will get lost or anything, but anything you can do to make it quicker and easier for us to access and know what we're looking for. But yeah, this was fun episode, I think, and it's a little bit long, so I think we should duck out here, but thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
If you like us, we're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as HSFamousPod. Email us at highschoolfamous@gmail.com. If you really love us, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/highschoolfamous. Remember, we love you and want to have your babies.